Hello and welcome to this pre-recorded session at International Telecoms Week 2021. We're really pleased you're joining us, and I'd like to introduce the session that you're going to view now, the Ascendance of Satellite-Enabled IoT. I'd like to quickly take this opportunity to thank the sponsors of this year's event. And now I will hand over to our moderator, Alan Burkett-Gray, Editor-at-Large for Capacity Media.
Thank you, Sophia, and greetings, everybody, and welcome to this panel. And I would like to introduce Brandon Sayer, Chris Gray, and Rajiv Singhal. And you could each quickly, one after the other, go through just say who you are, what company you're from, just quickly to introduce yourselves, please, before we get on with the panel. Rajiv, go first.
Hi, I'm Rajiv Singhal. I'm a solutions architect in the aerospace and newly formed aerospace and satellite organization, and I'm happy to be here today.
Sorry, organization of what company?
Oh, for AWS. I'm sorry.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, there we are.
I thought my T-shirt said it, but I guess you can't see my T-shirt.
We can't see your T-shirt, I'm afraid. No.
All right.
Brandon Sayer.
Thanks, Alan. I'm looking after sales and product development for Pacific. We're based out of Singapore. We operate Pacific One, the first K-band commercial satellite that covers 25 countries. So we've been producing and developing our own products with certain vendors in the region.
And you're in Singapore, are you?
Yes, I'm based out of Singapore.
Thank you, Brandon. And Chris Gray.
Yep. Hi, I'm Chris Gray. I'm a VP of Emerging Technologies and Business Development at Global Star. And we own and operate a constellation of LEO satellites with our global coverage. And I'm pretty excited to have this opportunity.
Great, thank you. Okay, let me introduce everybody or the subject. Now, IoT, Internet of Things use cases have been emerging in locations not served by terrestrial fiber, such as offshore oil rigs. One I keep hearing about is tracking containers, shipping containers in all sorts of obscure, not only at sea, but in wharfs all around the world. And it's amazing how many of them disappear. So what role can satellite play in enabling smart connected things? And that's what we're going to be talking about. And how do you secure and stabilize satellite connectivity for mission critical applications? And what partnerships are coming into play to make this synergy possible? What is the growth potential of this new business area? I guess it's very small at the moment, but so which implies there is a good growth potential, but let's look at the competitive market as well. So let's start off by separating IoT from other uses of satellites and fiber and cellular. What are the specific uses of IoT? I've just run through some, but you're the experts. Some uses of IoT that satellites are good for. What do you think? Rajiv, would you like to start?
Sure. So yes, IoT is nothing new. Actually, I spent a decade in the IoT space in various domains, from connected buildings to connected cars, connected home devices, etc. And we've used different technologies to connect the devices. Often the choice is made based on the customer's use case and the business outcomes that the customer requires. But with satellites, you have the unique ability to provide near global, ubiquitous connectivity to both assets such as ships, trucks, rail that are mobile, as well as fixed assets such as the oil rigs and other assets that are dispersed over vast geographic areas. So that's obviously the value that satellite-based IoT communication brings. But the older or the legacy systems that provide communication do not often provide the optimal connectivity due to cost, bandwidth, latency, coverage kind of limitations. So what's happening right now that's different is there's a disruption with the deployment of large LEO constellations, as Chris mentioned, companies like Starlink, OneWeb, and our own from Amazon Kuiper. That's going to provide broadband coverage to far-flung areas that are not connected to the internet at an affordable price. So price becomes important there. So this is naturally going to lend itself to IoT use cases that were not viable in the past. So that's kind of where the industry is going, what kind of use cases or why these use cases are now going to be possible that were kind of very niche and expensive. But not only that, I think the other important thing, it's not just about the satellite communications, it's also about seamless integration between satellite-based networks and terrestrial networks. And that helps stabilize the end-to-end connectivity in terms of latency, jitter, et cetera. So that's also very important. As AWS, we look at the end-to-end solution. We just don't look at kind of a part of the end-to-end solution. Now, same applies to security. We at Amazon or AWS, we say security is job zero at AWS, and we really mean it. When connecting IoT devices to applications that are running in the cloud, such as ours, you have various security domains that are traversed, by the packets that flow back and forth. So hence, we believe that it's really a shared responsibility between the customer and the infrastructure providers, whether it's a satellite or terrestrial cellular provider, et cetera, for providing end-to-end security. So that's kind of our take on security. Again, IoT is a very dispersed, diverse area, and there are lots of different players. There's lots of different technologies. So that's what makes it even more complex. But the innovation that's happening is definitely going in the right direction for IoT.
So, Chief. Chris, Global Star, it's one of the names of the satellite business that's been around quite a long time. What's your take on this, on the specific uses of satellites for IoT?
Yeah, it's pretty interesting because we have a different take. You see all these, as Rajiv said, new satellites, big broadband coming along and everything else. And there's a payoff between speed, size, battery power, and transmissions. So we go on the other end. We go with small products that can track the containers that you've been talking about, that go on the vessels, that go on the trains and track them globally. We can go on small assets, whether it's tools that need to be tracked, whether it's a truck that needs to be tracked. And satellite also gives you that inherent security side of it. For us, it's the device. It goes from the device straight up into our satellite, down to our gateway. Security there. We use a certain protocol on our satellites that inherently secured with CDMA. And so it's very hard to do anything, to look at our network, and our burst only lasts 1.5 seconds. So if you really want to try to do something, you've got to be really, really clever around it all. And then we only really want to be the device, the pipe. And so we work with people like Amazon and others that are providing that back-end solutions, because we deal with all these verticals, whether it's agriculture, whether it's oil and gas, whether it's mining, construction. We're not the experts in all of those fields, but our partners are. They have all of those solutions. So we have to deliver all of that information to them to deal with. And that's one of the key parts. And when we look at our partnerships, dealing with small data sizes, they're building edge computing and AI so that all of that computing is done locally, and they distill down the exceptions or the information that really needs to be sent. Do you really need to know that your cargo in the back of a trailer is okay every 5 minutes? Probably not, because you get numb to it. But if the cargo door opens and it shouldn't be opened at that time, that's the exception report. And that's where that small amount of data comes through. And, that's where some of the things are. And, we've got it small enough that now you can put a satellite ear tag on a cow and track cattle all over the world. And that's pretty fun stuff to do as well.
Excellent. Brandon, Pacific. Now, I've written a couple of pieces for Capacity Media on Pacific. I think from memory, one was coverage into New Zealand, from the remoter areas of New Zealand, and the other one, I think, was broadband satellite service into the Himalaya somewhere. And I can't remember whether it is Northern India or Nepal or Bhutan, but I'm sure you'll correct me. But what's Pacific's take on IoT? That's a different sort of market from a lot of what you do.
So let me begin with my personal take, and then I'll jump in to basically form the story from there. I come in from the telecom industry. I've basically worked in Africa, Central Asia, and part of Asia as well. At that point of time, we have a number of different challenges, and IoT as such is not new. We had a challenge to track the fuel for our generators. So we had to develop an IoT device for that, plug it into a SIM, and basically for every remote generator, we could actually track the fuel as and when we wanted. And then we could track the generators as such, the sites, if somebody would open the sites with smart warehousing and smart security systems. And so with that experience, with Pacific's launch in 2019, our focus has always been to basically offer connectivity in areas where connectivity is not there, commoditize internet to schools, clinics, government offices, and go further beyond that. We actually came across with IoT for two reasons. The first reason was really agriculture. It really started with New Zealand, as you just mentioned. So we covered all the countries around Australia, and then obviously Indonesia and Philippines, and then part of Nepal and Myanmar. So it was interesting because the farms in New Zealand, they wanted to basically track a number of things: humidity, nutrient level, temperature, and so it goes on with that. And what we
Brandon,
realized,
can you just check where your mic is? I think you must be rubbing against it or something. There's a lot of noise, background noise.
Let me change it. Okay,
that's all right.
Can
that's
you-
fine. That's better. Yeah.
better? All right.
Yeah.
So as such, what we realized is that the farms, when they would actually deploy a 75 cm antenna, which is an access or cost of around $450 or so, they could get up to 55 Mbps. And so as such, they connect multiple devices, but they also share the same infrastructure to run Wi-Fi for their little offices, and then connect some other people around it. So really that site becomes an infrastructure for connectivity and for IoT. Then from there, we had to develop other basically industries. So we went into oil and gas because of the Papua New Guinea. So we have a bit of a demand there. We are not really the experts in terms of packaging it together because, again, it's a small data. But then we work with different parties, and it's not easy to find the right parties these days. There are so many choices. So we had LoRaWAN, we had Wi-Fi systems for Cambium and others. We had to package it according to the standards of customers in different places. But mainly for us, it's farming, logistics, oil and gas at this point. And I think we're looking into shipping. But then for shipping, you would require certain different antennas, and altogether the price would be very different.
Is that actually on ships, or is that on containers on ships?
So it's also interesting to look into that vertical. So we in the Philippines, we have had a lot of luxury boats that they would like to just track the movement of their ship and basically report it back to a server, and as such it becomes a security thing. The other industry is the fishing industry. And we didn't actually know this, but they would like to track the type of fish they're getting, and then the load of the ship, and then it goes on beyond that. So when we were looking at this, it was very interesting because a lot of this comes with infrastructure sharing. So if they buy an antenna for the ship, they use that for community Wi-Fi within the ship and connectivity of the ship, and then they add IoT on it. So it's a very good package when it comes together.
Excellent, good. So let's talk next, other particular benefits. You've talked about some of the benefits, but are there some disbenefits of using satellite IoT? I guess not remotely because there's no alternative, but if you're in a terrestrial environment, are the disbenefits of using satellite IoT where you'd probably prefer to use cellular? I know you're three satellite people, but be frank, and or other terrestrial IoT. Where would you say to somebody, no, you've got a fairly good cellular signal here, use that rather than the satellite?
I'll answer that one as an honest thing. I think, look, if you're looking at build-up city, whether it's I've been to Singapore several times, or New York, or my hometown of London, those build-up areas with high-rise buildings, they block the view of the sky. And so, from a satellite point of view, you want to have a clear view of the sky. And and that's horizon to horizon. So and in the city, that's one of those areas where it's not benefit, and you've normally got great coverage on cellular. So why try and compete and do that in that area? It does come down to the rural areas.
Exactly. Sitting here in southeast London, I can see it's a bit larger than a full moon, but there's not much sky out there. There's a lot of trees in the way. Yeah.
That's it.
The satellite would not be an option here. Yeah.
So that's really where it is, and and there's different things, and that's from if you've got a fixed antenna like a satellite dish and things like that, you can put it on the roof, and that gives a different area and things like that. And again, it comes down to what's your use case, for backup, for emergencies, those types of things. That's there. But if it was for asset tracking, you might want a dual device, a satellite and cellular device that switches between the two, depending on your coverage.
Right.
Yeah, I think I agree with
you're
that.
nodding, I see. Yes, go on. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. I think that's a very good point, right? Rather than saying one or the other, it often works in conjunction with each other, right? So you have a local network that uses whatever LAN or wide area network technologies, and then you can have a secondary to fail over to if that primary connection doesn't work, or the primary network goes down or something. So I think that's the way I think we should look at satellite versus this or that kind of thing.
Right. So a mixture is good. Do you agree with that, Brandon?
I'm a telecoms guy, so I've spent a lot of time in 10 years of selling telecoms products.
Yeah.
So I would like to actually maybe share a different side of this. In the telecoms, when I was back in the days in 2004 and 3, when I was just an account manager selling it to businesses, most often I would face embassies and UN agencies, and then mining agencies, mining firms as such, that they wanted an availability of 100%. And as such, with the technology, even with telecoms and fiber, you can't really offer 100% availability. So
still only 5 nines we're talking about. It's not 55 nines. Yeah.
And so you had to tick the box. So and satellites were really expensive by then, because you had C-band and Ku-band. It was expensive. So what we have done here in the Philippines, Indonesia, and part of New Zealand is that, yes, you have cellular network, and that's the primary network that you would use. But if you want 100% availability to tick the box, we put a 1.2 meter antenna. It costs about a grand or so. It gets you 85 Mbps, and then that's a backup that offers you for anything else and for your tracking devices as such, if you need to connect it. I would really say it's in underserved and unserved areas, and probably places where you have chalked networks and fibers that you can't really offer 100% availability. And that's what we have seen in New Zealand. New Zealand has really good fiber network, but you wouldn't believe we have got over 1,000 sites right now for farmers and for salmon farms and for fishery farms that they would like to be connected to internet, even though they have a partial cellular network or a cellular network in one of these rural areas.
As anybody who's watched Lord of the Rings will know, there's a lot of countryside in New Zealand, and probably, not a lot of cellular network around there. Absolutely. Okay.
There's more sheep in New Zealand than people, right?
Indeed, yes.
Yep.
Let's look
and I think as well, Alan, there's the other side of it, which is emergency response.
Right.
I mean, unfortunately, you get hit with disasters, whether, we get hit with hurricanes here near Louisiana and Florida and things like that.
Oh,
and
Haiti with an earthquake where, over just a few days before we've recorded this, the Telecoms Sans Frontières sent out their team, where there's not only a 7.2 earthquake, but then a tropical storm, which is just devastating. And satellite is the only way.
Satellite becomes the only communications path because all of that prime technology comes down. So even then in the city, that's what you need. You need portable devices, either two-way messaging devices, satellite phones, or some base stations that need to be set up, and that's where the play comes in as well. And so that's a lot of those IoT devices. People want to track the generators. They want to track all of that equipment that goes out there because, let's be honest, it goes missing. And they want to know where it is and what happened to it and try and get it back because it's not cheap.
Chris, you've just led me into the next sector. So let's look at the cost. It's the Internet of Things. Let's look at the cost per thing in the Internet of Things. That might be a good way of doing it. What sort of costs are you talking about for, let's go with a device associated with a thing, whether it may be a container, a truck, a ship, a backhoe loader, an oil pipeline, airline baggage, something valuable you're sending in by Amazon. Sorry there, Rajiv, but whatever. What sort of cost are we talking about? Obviously, there's a variety, and it depends what sort of service you're expecting. But what do you think, Rajiv? I mean, as somebody who's on, sure. I guess your company is on both sides of all that.
Exactly. So I think when it comes to cost, we need to look at a holistic. We need to take a holistic approach. So there's the cost of the device that connects to the thing, whatever the thing is. It could be an animal, it could be a container, truck, equipment, whatever. There's the connectivity that we're all talking about here. There's also the data storage, processing. What do you do with that data, right? So that requires data to be transported somewhere. It needs to be stored. It needs to be processed. Often you do things like machine learning on the data for predictive analytics, predictive maintenance. Those are kind of the common IoT use cases in industrial environments. So as a customer, I think you need to look at the cost of the solution in the light of the business value it brings to you as an organization. Because there's no one solution fits all, and there's no point in connecting devices and sending information every 1 second when you really need to report exceptions, as Chris was saying earlier. So not only is it important to have the right components and the right technology to put the solution together, it's also the architecture, right? So edge-based computing, that's gaining a lot of traction because, again, for the same reason, you don't want to send all the data to the back end. There could be a latency disadvantage. There could also be data sovereignty issues. Data cannot just be shipped from one part of the world to another. You may need to keep that local to that device or that.
A lot of it is actually personal, because if it's somebody driving a truck, exactly. That's personal data for that driver. Right. Yeah.
Right. So yeah, I mean, it's a very holistic approach that customers should take and often take when it comes to building IoT solutions.
Yeah. Okay. So what was your view on this, Chris? What do you say about the cost? What sort of costs are you looking for the device? Let's start with the device, and then later with all three of you, I'll come to what's the sort of typical cost per month for providing connectivity. But cost per device, what sort of things are we talking about?
I mean, we have low-cost devices. They'll start.
What does low cost mean?
Depending on the device, can be as low as $100,
right,
up to like $300 for just tracking devices that are out there. It's got to be affordable for the market. And
what's the complexity and what's the feature in that? Is it battery life, or making sure it's screwed properly to the device, which is whatever it is, a vehicle or a container or something else, or what where does that cost come from?
The cost is going to drive on the use case. So we have a simple device that a little trace device, and it's more for the consumer side of it, because we do consumer and business side, but it's still an IoT thing. And that's a basic tracking device. You know, you put it in a vehicle, it'll tell you its location, it'll tell you if it's moved, you know, it's great for theft stuff. Very, very basic. It's battery powered. That's it. On the other end of the scale, we have a solar unit, has 10-year life with solar. It has the ability, it's ATEX certified. So for oil and gas, it's, you know, it's very, very safe, intrinsically safe for that side of it. And it has also the ability to have Bluetooth sensors put on it. So whether you want to monitor tank levels, weight of a container, temperature, all of these types of things. And when we talk about edge computing, one of the things that one of our partners is doing is actually having a video camera that monitors what's inside the trailer. And if something falls over, they just send a small note that says, hey, something fell over. And they'll say, that's because this vehicle was traveling too fast, or it went too fast around a corner, right? So they correlate the driving characteristics with what happened. Or they know that this trailer shouldn't have been, the trailer door is open and they saw someone moving around inside, but they're not sending the video or the picture that's being analyzed locally. They're just sending the alert that someone was in the back of the trailer when they shouldn't be. And so,
and I
you
can
know,
see why we're getting into
confidentiality
problems there, because that is personal information. Okay,
well,
privately owned trailer,
thing,
but
you know, it's a company thing. It's for those fleets that are out there, and they've got, you know, whether it's they're delivering, you know, the hundreds of Amazon products that I, you know, get delivered every day, it seems.
Yeah, or it's another brown parcel.
Or not, right?
Time of day. Yeah.
but you need that level of security, and there are other large, high-profile, you know, high-value assets that may be in those containers, and that shouldn't be, you know, taken or stolen or gone missing, in quotes there, at any time. And so those are the types of things. And so our devices are there not for us to come up with the entire solution, but to add a core part of it to work with partners to come up with what's needed for the marketplace. Yeah. And as I say, make it affordable between sort of the $100 to $300 range of a piece of hardware, to go out there and make that happen.
Right. Brandon, as a Pacific is a relative newcomer in the business, as you say, you've got long experience in the industry. But what sort of costs are you taking? Are you being cost competitive in the IoT market, or are you competing on different ways?
So we have actually targeted customers who would use their own network, an existing network of IoT that they have set up based on one-time cost that they've basically bought different devices to connect to an internet network as such. And they have always been very worried about ongoing costs of how much they have to pay for a gigabyte of data or 2 gigabytes of data, which the 1 or 2 gigabytes in most cases is just about $2.50 or $2, depending on the market and where you sell it. But recently, what has been very interesting is actually the device versus the network. So if you have to sell the network, then the network is basically, it comes down to what benefits it offers to the firm. Usually the mining industry, I should say, they are not very concerned about buying the whole of the network, and one-time fees are okay as long as it gives them enough benefit and it ticks the boxes for them. But then the other industries or segments, I should say, the farming and agriculture, they're very cost-centric or cost-sensitive. And so they would like to buy devices that's in the ranges of $25 to $30. They would like to spend, you know, one time of $3 or $4 grand on a network that works for a small farm. So we really have to segment that market here in this side of the world. And that goes way beyond that in the Philippines, that they would not want to invest over 10K when it comes to the fishing industry. So as such,
well, these people have scrape a living. I mean, right across the world. It's a hard life being a farmer or a fisher or whatever. Yeah, you don't want suddenly to find yourself with an IoT bill of several $1,000s. Yeah,
it is. So it's a cost-sensitive market. It's a market where you can actually offer the device as such part of a retention pack to offer internet connectivity for a customer that would generate about $150, $200. And then you would actually believe that they would talk about it to other farmers, and you can actually penetrate that market there. But in PNG, for instance, the oil industry or the mining industry, they don't really mind. They have their own managed service providers that they would give them the network. And they would ask us to basically design packages to deliver the connectivity for the type of connectivity they require.
Well, that leads on to the next sector, agricultural technology, and we've touched on that with fishing and farming and so on. So what's the key opportunity here for IoT, satellite IoT? Is it tracking and monitoring the health of animals where outside the range of terrestrial networks, or is it other things? Who would like to have a go on that one? Chris?
Yeah, I'll start that one.
Yeah, go on.
No, it is interesting because the agriculture market, especially on cattle, for example, is very price sensitive. And so it's not just about what are you going to do with that cost of the unit and how does that affect the animal. It's about how is it affecting the business. We have one ranch that's over in Australia, and it's 1 million acres in size. And they spend roughly $1 million a year on just aircraft fuel trying to find the animals. Well, we put the tags on there, that reduced their cost by half. So, $500,000 of savings is part of that. And
I guess chasing a cow on a plane is going to be quite a fruitless exercise because it's going to run away or something like that. It's much better if you know where you're going to start with.
Yeah, you've got to know. But 1 million acres is hard to get your head around. And I don't want to sound too US centric, but it is like the size of the state of Rhode Island. I mean, it's huge.
I was just going to suggest it might be a good chunk of the size of London, which is where I am. So yeah.
No, it's more like having the size of the UK, and that's the ranch, and you're trying to find your animals there, and that's the challenge, And not all ranches are like that, but they're free roaming, and they go out, and they also the herd wanders off, and they'll lose 5%, 10% of the herd because they can't track them, and now what they're doing is they're saying, okay, well now we know some of the herd is moving off. And we can go and get that back because our cost savings of the fuel of knowing where they are, I can also increase my profitability at the end of the year by having, maybe only 5% instead of a 10% loss of the herd and my cost savings. And that's where it comes into play. On the cases of some of the ranches in the US, for example, they're not as big. There are some, but what they'll do is they'll put it on 10% of the herd, and that'll monitor it.
It's a sort of sample.
They'll put it on their prize bulls, which are worth $30,000 a piece, and they want to know exactly where they are and that the neighbors haven't borrowed them during the right season. So
yes, okay.
It's all very interesting use cases that, as a city boy, I never thought I would need to know about cows and animals. But what's interesting is when you're in this satellite business, you may not be selling the end product. We have a lot of partners that do it, but you have to understand it from a pricing point of view and a technicality point of view of what product you need to build and what the price point is. A farmer is not going to pay $10 a month for their subscription service for the life of a cow because they'll never get that return on investment. So we have to be very creative on what we can do around that particular pricing model for that particular market, but that's not what's going to play in other markets.
It's like mobile bundles with 10th to the 10th degree. Rajiv, are you going to
so I think there's kind of a hybrid approach that we're generally in favor of, right? So sometimes it's only cellular, sometimes it's only satellite, but for some of the kind of use cases that we're talking about here, tracking animals, herds, etc. We've actually deployed a solution in the Australia, New Zealand region that basically uses a combination of LoRaWAN with backhaul. I think it's cellular, maybe it's satellite, but doesn't matter. It's still a hybrid approach. You have a gateway that communicates on an unlicensed band with a bunch of assets. They could be fixed assets, monitoring an agricultural field, or it could be cattle or whatever. But then you have a single backhaul that then sends exception data, as Chris was mentioning earlier, right? So you don't need all that bandwidth to send data continuously. And also, you may not always need to monitor 100% of your herd, right? So as long as you have a good sampling, you can generally kind of get the health and location of these kind of assets. So that's kind of our take, and also to say that we as AWS don't try to do everything ourselves. We have a very robust partnership network as well.
Indeed.
And we rely on them to provide us the best technology for the best use case.
The last 4 or 5 minutes, can we address what's the difference between LEO, MEO, and GEO? I won't explain those terms. Anybody who's watching this will probably be able to work that out. But are there some applications which GEO is great, geosynchronous satellites, or are you feeling threatened in the GEO area by low orbit and medium orbit satellites? Let me throw that at Brandon, because you've got Pacific, I think, is geostationary, isn't it?
Yes.
Are you feeling threatened?
To be very honest, not really, because I think there's a lot of demand for data in these markets. And as such, having one satellite that gives you 35 gigabytes, for each customer, and then in general, 36 or 40 GBps for 25 markets is not enough. You're looking at Philippines and you're looking at Indonesia. People are demanding for more data, and as such, the telecom companies and fiber companies are not really rolling out into areas or islands with lesser number of population people. So we feel it's a complement. We actually think there's a lot more data demand in these markets. We should be working together to connect more people in these countries. As such, you would have hospitals, clinics, and border polices, and then it goes on to residentials and businesses that we wouldn't have enough capacity to cover. Like, for instance, in Indonesia, we're already not running out of capacity, although the satellite was just launched a year ago. So it's a good problem to have when you don't have capacity. I think competition is also good because it complements and introduces new technologies. But there's a lot of demand in these markets, and we're covering some of the dense populated areas or countries. So we're not feeling threatened, I should say. What we see, however, is we will have to work through a price in the market with the products we offer, so that we don't really fight over offering unlimited plans over each other and then basically lose money in these markets. As such, competition is good, but it has to probably be coordinated competition.
Thank you very much. So Brandon Sear, Chris Gray, and Rajiv Singhal, thank you for joining us at International Telecoms Week. I've enjoyed talking to you very much about IoT on satellites. So look forward to catching up with you in real life at some time in the future and following the development of this actually amazing sector that's emerged over the last few years. But thank you, all three of you. Thank you very much indeed.
Thanks a lot, Anne.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much for joining this session. It will be available for on-demand viewing, and we look forward to seeing you at the other sessions throughout the event. Thank you.